Sophia had lived in Madrid for nearly 6 years, long enough to know the rhythm of the city. The late dinners, the echo of footsteps down narrow streets after midnight, the way the old buildings seemed to sigh when the heating pipes rattled. She thought she had seen it all until the night she moved into the flat on Calle de Atocha. The flat wasn't remarkable at first glance. It was one of those aging apartments with high ceilings, peeling paint on the shutters, and an elevator that groaned like a wounded animal. The landlord, an older man with deep-set eyes and yellowed fingernails, had shown her around quickly, avoiding her gaze when she asked about the unusually low rent. "It's small, but good location," he muttered, jingling his keys. "You'll like it here." She tried to convince herself the deal was just luck. A studio near Atocha station at half the going rate was unheard of. She unpacked that evening, cooking pasta on the tiny stovetop while the sounds of traffic filtered up from the street below. For a while, she felt comforted. Madrid, with its endless noise, always kept her company. But at 2:13 a.m., she woke to the sound of someone walking in her flat. She froze, heart hammering. The studio was one open space. There was no hallway, no extra room for someone to be hiding. Yet she heard the distinct drag of footsteps across the old wooden floorboards. "Hola!" Her voice cracked, brittle. The sound stopped. She reached for her phone on the bedside table, but the screen didn't light up. The battery had been at 60% when she went to sleep. Now it was dead. Her eyes adjusted slowly to the dim orange glow from the streetlight seeping through the curtains. The flat was empty. Sophia sat awake until dawn, clutching a kitchen knife, convincing herself it must have been the neighbors through the thin walls. But something about the sound, the deliberate shuffle, the pause, as though whoever it was knew she was listening, felt too close. The next day at work, she told her colleague, Javier, about it. He laughed it off. "Old buildings do that. They creak, they carry sound. My cousin used to live near Lavapiés, swore someone was whispering in his walls. Turns out it was just the neighbor's TV." His dismissal calmed her, if only slightly. She bought a portable charger on her way home, deciding she'd sleep with her phone plugged in and a podcast playing so she wouldn't notice the noises. That night, the footsteps came again. This time, they started in the corner near the wardrobe and moved closer, deliberate, heavy. She forced herself to whisper into the dark, "I know you're not real." But a second sound followed, the unmistakable creak of her wardrobe door easing open. The next morning, she found the door ajar, though she clearly remembered shutting it. By Friday, Sophia was exhausted. Her colleagues joked about her bloodshot eyes and extra coffees. Javier teased, "You're acting like Madrid is haunted. Maybe the ghosts from the Spanish Civil War are visiting you." The joke landed uneasily. That evening, as she climbed the dim stairwell of her building, she noticed something scratched into the wall near her door. "No duermas aquí. Don't sleep here." The handwriting was jagged, etched deep into the plaster. Her landlord lived on the floor below. She knocked on his door, demanding answers. He stared at her for a long moment, then shrugged. "Probably kids. This neighborhood has them. Bored teenagers with keys to the building. Don't worry." But his eyes betrayed something else, a flicker of recognition, even fear. That night, Sophia triple-locked the door. She left every light on. Yet sometime after midnight, she was dragged awake not by footsteps, but by the faint sound of breathing just beside her bed. Sophia bought rationality in small devices, a plug-in carbon monoxide detector from the ferreteria on Santa Isabel, a no-name motion camera, and a roll of blue painter's tape. If it was a person, she'd see them. If it was the building, she'd measure it. At the bar downstairs, Maria set a quarter-due in front of her and, when asked, kept it simple. "Old pipes, old owner." The last girl complained of headaches. Sophia remembered her own cotton mornings and said nothing about the carved warning or the breath by her bed. Back upstairs, she taped a thin strip over the wardrobe seam so any opening would tear it. She sifted a light ribbon of flour across the floorboards in front of the door. She angled the motion camera toward the bed and wardrobe, set it to alert her phone, and told herself she'd sleep because there would be evidence. At 1:50 she put on a podcast, faced down the phone, and watched the ceiling's cracks turn into rivers. The city dipped toward its brief lull, taxis whispering, a distant bin truck clanging. 2:10. 2:12. The podcast cut mid-word. Air thickened around her, as if the room had been wrapped in wet cloth. The carbon monoxide detector by the outlet sat dumb and green. A sound rose from inside the wall, a slow, patient exhale, not pipes, not the elevator, breathing. Sophia grabbed her phone. The screen stayed black, flashed a logo, then died again. The motion camera's status light pulsed red. An alert buzzed and disappeared as the phone restarted. She slid off the bed, palm flat to the floorboards. The flour lay undisturbed, the tape unbroken. The exhale sidled toward the bed, the measured sigh of someone leaning close. She crawled to the wall and pressed her ear to it. A hiss streamed past, paused, and a small thud followed, like a valve closing. Cold brushed her cheek. She unlatched the window a finger's width. The draft strengthened. The wardrobe door gave a dry pop and eased as the tape split. The flour did not move. Her breath fogged. A faint metal smell threaded the air. The lamp flickered on and held. The detector chirped once, not an alarm, only a memory of one. Its tiny screen read ppm max, 18. Low, not 0. Dawn ruined certainty the way dawn does. The motion clip showed a gray frame, then 2 minutes of black from 2:13 to 2:15. Power blip. Her phone's log listed an unexpected shutdown at the exact time. She photographed the stairwell warning in full morning light. It looked like vandalism again, but she printed a copy and folded it into her wallet anyway. When she found the landlord, he lifted his palms. "Buy a better detector," he said, and smiled as if that solved a math problem. "And do not open windows at night. You waste heat." That evening Javier turned up with a flashlight and the expression he used on software bugs. He shone the beam along the wall behind the wardrobe. The plaster there was newer, a neat rectangle feathered into old surface. He rapped it with his knuckles. It sounded hollow. "Service shaft," he said. Someone boxed it. They pulled the wardrobe a handspan from the wall and sat on the bed with coats over their knees. The city slid toward 2. Somewhere below, a burner kicked with a soft hoof, and the apartment exhaled through every seam. "Whatever this is," Javier said, "it's scheduled." He set his phone to record the room's sound. Sophia kept her hand on the wardrobe handle as if she were holding the breath in place. At 2:13, the light dipped. The detector blinked from 0 to 13 to 19 in quick steps. The tape across the wardrobe seam shivered. Sophia felt the room lean. She understood that if she pretended this was nothing, it would become everything. "Tonight we stay awake," Javier said, and smiled without humor. They set traps like patient thieves. Javier wedged a rubber doorstop beneath the wardrobe. He tied a string from the handle to a cup of water so any opening would tip it. He left the window cracked despite the November cold. Sophia placed the carbon monoxide detector on the bed and plugged her phone in airplane mode so no update could kill the battery. At 1:45 Javier swabbed a damp line across the patched plaster and dusted it with cinnamon. "If air moves, it will draw the spice," he said. They killed the light. The radiator ticked. The street went blue. At 2:11, the detector blinked 12. At 2:12:19. At 2:13, the light sagged and the room bowed toward the wall, a pressure more than a sound. The cinnamon streak drifted. The string quivered. The wardrobe pressed against the doorstop and lifted a hair anyway. ppm 38. Sophia's mouth tasted metallic. "Window more," Javier said, hauling the sash higher. The numbers slowed, then climbed again with a soft, distant hoof from below. ppm 62. Sophia's scalp prickled and the room tilted, just enough to convince her body it had been wrong all week to stay. They stared at the patched rectangle. The plaster's feathered edge flexed on a breath. Javier touched it and felt a draft. "This is a void," he said. "Coal, trash, pipes. Someone sealed it badly." "Call him," Sophia said. The landlord sent back a voice note about everything meeting code and a string of thumbs-up emojis. Javier held the phone out. "He thinks reassurance is a sticker." They waited through another cycle, then another. Each time, a dip in voltage, a pull at their ears, the detector edging higher. 44, then 57, then 73. Sophia opened both kitchen and bathroom windows, and the numbers eased. Outside, taxis hissed along Atocha. Inside, the patch bulged like a lung. "Enough," Javier said. He slid a putty knife from his backpack and worked it under the seam. The plaster lifted with a papery crack. A rectangle peeled away and fell to the floor in a burst of dust. Behind it, a shaft yawned, brick glossed with soot, old cables stitched down one edge, stale air moving up and down on a slow metronome. Sophia leaned close and felt the draft touch her teeth. A flexible aluminum hose, the kind used for dryers, rose from below and ended inside the shaft, not to any flue. "Is that legal?" she asked. Javier didn't answer. The detector trilled again. ppm 91. Sophia's fingers tingled. Her head grew cottony. She imagined the carved warning and wondered if it had been written by someone who had already gone to sleep. "Out," Javier said, calm in a way that made her faster. He shut the bedroom door on reflex, thought better, and opened it wide. They walked, not ran. They had to think with their feet. The stairwell smelled of cold stone and oil. Their neighbor's door opened a crack. An eye looked out and withdrew. In the bar, Maria took one look and fetched water. Javier called 112, voice clipped. Possible carbon monoxide. Old building. Unsealed shaft. The operator's questions were precise. Javier's answers were short. Sophia pressed her hands to the glass and watched her breath draw little ovals that vanished at the same speed as the room upstairs had filled. Sirens did not wail. They arrived soft, like a decision. Firefighters shouldered past with meters that clicked and screens that glowed. One went upstairs with Javier. Another stayed with Sophia and asked the kind of questions that arranged her fear into a list. Headaches, nausea, time of night, windows open or shut. When she said 2:13, the firefighter's mouth went flat, the expression of someone who recognizes a schedule. Upstairs, a radio crackled. "Elevated in the stairwell," a voice said. "Void behind the wall. Negative pressure on boiler ignition." A pause. "Evacuate." They took the stairs because the elevator felt like a coffin. Maria looked up as they reached the bar, Sophia pale, Javier steadying her elbow, and didn't ask questions. "Sit," she said, sliding water across. Javier dialed 112. The operator's calm scared Sophia more than the beeping had. A fire truck arrived with quiet efficiency. 2 firefighters followed Javier upstairs while another stayed with Sophia and asked questions that turned fear into a list. Headaches when, nausea when, windows open or closed. Upstairs, metal rang on plaster. Unsealed void, a firefighter said into his radio. Negative pressure when the basement boiler kicks. Another voice. Levels rising in stairwell. Evacuate. People poured out in coats over pajamas. Dogs confused on leashes. The elderly neighbor crossed herself. The landlord arrived, sweater over his shoulders. Overreaction, he told a firefighter. Everything meets code. Does everything include a flexible exhaust line feeding into a coal shaft? The firefighter asked. The landlord's face moved through several expressions and chose none. On the curb, Sophia's phone delivered a stack of 213 motion alerts, each blank. Diagnostics showed power dips at the same minute. The precision made everything feel less like a haunting and more like a schedule kept by a machine. Another truck arrived. A woman in a navy jacket clipped a meter to Sophia's shirt. "You did the right thing," she said, scanning numbers. "Levels like that, night after night, and eventually you stop waking up." By dawn, the building stood emptied and taped. Two police officers listened while firefighters described illegal modifications and duty of care. Escorted upstairs to pack, they saw the patch peeled clean, the shaft open, bricks slick with soot, cables stitched along one edge, and a silver flexible hose snaking up from the basement to nowhere. When the burner ignited, its breath took the path of least resistance, into walls, rooms, lungs. "Why the wardrobe door?" Javier asked. "Pressure," the firefighter said. "Rooms become lungs. Doors move like ribs." Sophia touched the handle, thinking of tape and flour and the nights she'd almost ignored what her body knew. The stairwell warning, Enoduermas AQU, felt human, not mystical. She showed a firefighter the photo. He studied it. "Maybe the last tenant," he said. They packed quickly. Sophia slipped the detector and the photo into her bag. At the door, she paused at the motion camera. One clip at 2:16 had saved. A grey view of bed and wardrobe, the fresh crack like a mouth. A shadow crossed the wall, human in profile for 2 seconds. "Harvey," she said. They froze the frame and traced the edge. The elevator had risen at 2:16, cables sliding in the service space. With the new opening, the motion threw a face onto her wall and vanished. A trick with a diagram. Relief arrived with a smaller disappointment she didn't name. On the street, Maria brought Napolitanas and refused payment. Red tape banded the door. A policewoman took statements and asked if they'd testify. The landlord stood apart, pretending to text. "You're staying with me," Javier said. Sophia nodded, then looked up at her window where the curtains lifted like a breath and settled again. Madrid went on, a garbage truck muttering, a bus sighing at the stop, runners clapping by in neon. Weeks later, in a new flat in Lavapiés, she sometimes woke at 2:13 and lay still, listening. The only breathing was her own and the city's. She kept the detector plugged in. She kept the photo in her wallet, not for luck but memory. One rainy afternoon she stopped by the old block for mail. The stairwell had been replastered. The warning was gone. In the bar, Maria poured a coffee with a nod that closed a circle. "I still hear things at night," Sophia said. Maria tipped her head at the windows, where buses sighed and doors opened and closed with a soft, constant rhythm. "Of course you do," she said. "Everything here breathes."